I found my mother's shoes. This letter was hidden inside, human read it. And collapsed to his knees, the wind whispered through the broken walls of the palace, carrying with it the smell of dust and rain-soaked stone. Once this place had been alive with music, laughter, and the quiet conversations of those who served a king and queen. Now it was empty, crumbling, a skeleton of its former glory. Shadows stretched long across the faded tapestries, and the floor was littered with fragments of glass, wood, and memories. Alurin moved carefully through the halls, his boots echoing against the cold stones. Each step reminded him of absence, the absence of his mother, of the warmth that once filled these rooms, of the safety he had never truly known. He was alone, yet he carried the weight of a kingdom he barely understood. His hand brushed against the cracked walls as if seeking guidance from the ghosts that lingered. He remembered the rumors whispered in the villages beyond the palace walls, that his mother, the queen, had vanished on a night shrouded in fear and magic. That some curse had claimed her, or perhaps she had left to protect him and the kingdom from an enemy he could not yet see. No one had given him answers, and the court had long since dissolved into silence and shadows. Only the palace remained, and only its secrets could speak. It was in a forgotten wing, behind a door barely hanging on its hinges, that Alurin found what he had not known he sought. A small room hidden away, with a single wooden chest resting against the wall. The chest was old, its lock rusted as though it had not been touched in decades. He knelt, wiping away the dust, and lifted the lid. Inside lay a pair of shoes. They were small, delicate, the kind a queen might wear during quiet walks through the palace gardens. The leather was worn but cared for, soft with the passage of time. Alurin's breath caught. He had never seen these shoes before, and yet they carried a strange familiarity, as though they whispered his mother's presence. Tucked inside one of the shoes was a folded piece of paper. The edges were brittle, the ink faded, but the writing was careful, elegant, his mother's hand unmistakable. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letter, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "My dearest Alurin," it began. Even the first line shook him. It was not just a greeting, it was a lifeline, a thread reaching across time and absence. As he read, words poured into his mind, heavy with sorrow, regret, and a warning he was unprepared for. She wrote of betrayal within the palace, of shadows that had crept into the hearts of those closest to her. She wrote of an enemy that could not be fought with sword or shield, but with courage and understanding that would take decades to grow. And she wrote of Elijah. The name struck him like a cold wind. He had heard it in whispered rumors, a name carried by fear and curiosity. His mother had spoken of Elijah not as a threat, but as someone entwined with the fate of the royal family, a being both bound and cursed, a guide and a warning. Alurin's vision blurred. His knees buckled under the weight of the revelations. He sank to the floor, clutching the letter, and for the first time in years, allowed himself to feel the full depth of his grief. The loss of his mother, the uncertainty of his own path, and the fear of what he did not yet understand pressed down upon him like a storm. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes, but when he finally lifted his head, his eyes were red, his chest heavy with sorrow. The shoes sat before him, innocent and small, yet they carried the burden of secrets that could change the kingdom forever. And then he felt it, a presence. A quiet movement in the shadows of the room, something that did not belong to the wind or the broken walls. He turned sharply, heart pounding, but saw nothing. "Who's there?" he called, his voice trembling. Silence answered him, but he knew. He felt it deep in his chest. He was no longer alone. Something watched him, waiting. Something that had been waiting for the moment he found the letter, that understood the weight of the words his mother had left behind. He rose slowly, brushing the dust from his robes, and tucked the shoes and letter into his cloak. Every instinct told him to flee, to run from the palace and the shadows that now seemed alive with secrets. Yet another part, deeper and quieter, told him to stay, to confront whatever waited in the darkness, to understand what his mother had hidden from him. The corridors were longer than he remembered, twisting and turning in ways that seemed unnatural. The palace itself felt alive, breathing, shifting. A distant drip of water echoed like a clock counting down. The walls whispered his name, the tapestries seemed to murmur fragments of the past, and shadows danced just beyond the reach of the light from his torch. Alurin stopped before a cracked mirror. His reflection stared back at him, pale, haunted, yet determined. The boy he had been was gone. In his place stood someone shaped by loss, grief, and the sudden burden of destiny. He touched the glass, tracing the line of his jaw, and whispered, "I will find the truth, Mother, I swear it." As he moved deeper into the palace, he found a staircase that led to a hidden chamber below. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying a faint scent of roses and smoke. He could feel magic here, old and lingering, twisting around the stones like a living thing. His pulse quickened. Somewhere in this place was the first clue to Elijah, to the curse, to the life his mother had fought to protect. The chamber was small, circular, lined with shelves of ancient books, scrolls, and objects long forgotten. Candles, though unlit, seemed to flicker as if stirred by an invisible hand, and in the center on a pedestal lay a small, blackened mirror. Alurin approached it cautiously. As he drew closer, the surface shimmered. His own reflection wavered and shifted, replaced by flashes of another face, a woman with dark, luminous eyes staring back at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. She spoke without words. Her gaze was sharp, compelling, and full of something he could not name, warning, longing, fear, and hope all at once. Alurin staggered backward, the letter falling from his hands. The shoes remained clutched to his chest. He could feel the pulse of magic in the room, as though the palace itself had awakened at the discovery of this long-hidden secret. And then, just as suddenly, the vision vanished. The mirror was only glass once more. The chamber was silent. Yet Alurin knew with an unshakable certainty that he had been seen. Someone, or something, had watched him, marking him, waiting for the moment when he would take the first step toward understanding. He gathered the letter and the shoes again and moved toward the stairs, determined to leave the hidden chamber. But at the top, a shadow shifted in the corner of the corridor. A figure draped in dark robes, silent as the grave, stepped forward. The torchlight caught only a glimpse of sharp features and eyes that glimmered with intelligence and something darker, something that stirred a strange sense of recognition in Alurin's chest. The figure spoke, voice low and measured. "You have found what was hidden. And with it you have awakened what sleeps." Alurin's heart raced. He wanted to run, to flee into the mist outside, yet his feet stayed planted. Something about this figure called to him, pulled him forward, demanded his attention and courage. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. The figure inclined their head slightly. "I am called many things, but you may call me the beginning of your journey." Alurin swallowed hard. The weight of the letter, the shoes, and the secrets of his mother pressed on him more heavily than ever. And yet, despite fear, despite confusion, there was a spark of something else. Determination, hope, a thread of destiny connecting him to the path he had been too afraid to walk until now. The figure turned and with a motion of their hand pointed toward the distant forest beyond the palace walls. "Go," the figure whispered. "Seek her. Seek the one your mother wrote of. She waits, but time is short and shadows are patient." Alurin nodded, unable to speak. The shoes, once small and delicate, now felt like a key, one that could unlock not only the secrets of the past, but the fate of a kingdom. He tucked them carefully into his cloak and stepped toward the palace doors, feeling the first touch of wind on his face. The world beyond was uncertain, dangerous, and filled with secrets, but it was also alive with the possibility of answers and perhaps redemption. As he passed through the archway, he paused and glanced back. The hidden chamber seemed to pulse with quiet power, the shadows shifting like living things. And somewhere deep within the palace, a voice whispered, soft, urgent, almost a sigh, "Find her before it is too late." With that, Alurin stepped into the misty morning, carrying the shoes, the letter, and the first fragile threads of a journey that would change everything. The forest awaited. The unknown awaited. And somewhere, just beyond sight, Elijah waited too, her presence already entwined with his fate. And the first step of a story that had been written long before his birth was finally beginning to unfold. The forest waited like a breath held for centuries. Mist curled around the roots of ancient trees, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. Every step Alurin took seemed to echo in the silence, as though the trees themselves were listening, watching, waiting. He had left the ruins of the palace behind, but the weight of the letter and the shoes pressed against his chest, heavy with secrets and unspoken truths. He walked for hours, unsure of where he went, guided only by instinct and the faint pull of something he could not name. The deeper he moved into the forest, the more he felt it, the subtle hum of magic in the air. It was a pulse, gentle yet persistent, like a heartbeat buried beneath the soil, and with it came a presence, soft at first, then sharper, more distinct. Alurin stopped. His hand went to the hilt of his sword, though he had no intention of drawing it. The feeling was not of danger, but of awareness. Someone, or something, was near, watching. He held his breath, straining his ears. A rustle came from behind a thick cluster of trees. Leaves trembled, branches swayed, and then she appeared. Elijah. She stepped from the shadows with the grace of a creature born of both light and night. Her hair fell like a dark waterfall over her shoulders, and her eyes glimmered with a strange, otherworldly light. She moved silently, her gaze fixed on Alurin, studying him as one might study a fragile bird caught in a storm. Alurin's heart raced. He had expected danger, perhaps a spirit or some creature born from the forest's magic. But not this. Not a woman who seemed both ethereal and real, both distant and impossibly close. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. She tilted her head as though considering whether to answer. "I am someone who knows more than you can understand," she said finally, her voice soft, yet carrying an edge that made him listen intently. Alurin stepped closer. "Do you know about my mother?" Elijah's eyes flickered with something, a shadow of pain, perhaps, or regret. "I know of her, and of you. You carry her weight now, though you do not yet understand it." The words struck him. He had felt alone in the world for so long, and now, standing before this strange woman, he felt the first stirrings of hope and fear. "Why are you here?" he asked, his tone sharper now, protective of the fragile courage he was trying to summon. Elijah did not answer immediately. Instead, she took a step closer, and the mist seemed to swirl around her, following her movements like a living thing. "Because you found what was hidden," she said finally. "The shoes, the letter, your mother left more than words. She left a path, and you have taken the first step upon it." Alurin's grip tightened on the letter in his cloak. "Then tell me everything." Elijah shook her head slowly. "Not yet. It is not safe for you to know everything, not until you are ready. The forest watches, and there are others who will not let you leave here alive if they sense what you now carry." A chill ran down Alurin's spine. He had expected danger, yes, but the certainty in her voice made the forest itself seem darker, older, more alive than it had moments before. "Then guide me," he said. "I have nowhere else to go. I will face whatever comes." For the first time, a small smile touched Elijah's lips, fleeting and fragile. "Bravery or perhaps recklessness," she murmured. "We shall see which it is." They walked together, the silence between them heavy with unspoken questions. Alurin studied her from the corner of his eye. There was a sadness in her posture, a tension in her shoulders, as if she carried chains only she could feel. And yet there was also strength, an elegance that seemed born of both experience and magic. He sensed that she was bound to something ancient, something powerful, and that his mother's secrets were tied to her in ways he did not yet understand. The forest opened into a clearing. Moonlight spilled across the ground, silver and cold. Here the mist swirled thicker, curling around their feet and dancing with the shadows of the trees. Elijah stopped and turned to face him fully. "You must understand," she said softly, "that what you carry is not only your mother's past, it is the fate of the kingdom. The choices you make from this moment will shape what comes after, and the shadows are patient. They wait for the weakest moment to strike." Alurin swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words press against his chest. "Then I will not falter," he said, though even as he spoke, doubt coiled in the pit of his stomach. He was only one person, carrying the grief of a mother he barely remembered and the legacy of a kingdom crumbling under silence and fear. Elijah's eyes softened, just slightly. Perhaps you will learn that strength comes not from the sword, but from the heart, from understanding and sacrifice, from love, though you do not yet know it." The mention of love made Alurin's throat tighten. He had known longing, yes, and he had known loneliness, but love had always seemed like a distant dream, impossible and fragile. And yet, standing here looking into her eyes, he felt a spark, something dangerous, beautiful, and utterly compelling. A sudden sound shattered the stillness, a branch snapping underfoot, distant but deliberate. Both of them froze. "They are close," Elijah whispered, tension threading her voice. "We do not have much time. Follow me." Without waiting, she moved toward the edge of the clearing, gliding through the mist with an uncanny grace. Alurin followed, his heart pounding in his chest. Every sense was heightened, every shadow a potential threat. He did not ask where they were going, because he knew that question might cost him precious moments. The forest grew darker, the trees older and more twisted. Strange shapes moved just beyond the reach of the moonlight, and the air seemed to vibrate with a quiet, almost imperceptible energy. Elijah led him through narrow paths and hidden clearings, moving with a knowledge of the forest that Alurin could not comprehend. Finally, they arrived at a small glade, illuminated by the soft glow of enchanted flowers that seemed to pulse like living lanterns. In the center was a pool of water, still and reflective, yet it shimmered with a light that was not entirely natural. Elijah turned to him. "This place is a sanctuary, though only briefly," she said. "Here we can speak without fear of being overheard, but even here you must listen carefully and you must trust what you see." Alurin nodded, his eyes drawn to the pool. The reflection that met him was not his own alone. Shadows shifted within the water, forming shapes and faces, whispering fragments of words he could almost understand. He reached out, hesitant, and the water rippled under his touch. "You see more than you know," Elijah said. "Your mother's past, your family's legacy, the curse that binds me, all of it resides in the threads of this forest, and now you are woven into it as well." He looked at her, searching her eyes. "Tell me what I must do. Tell me how to find her, how to break the curse, whatever it is." Elijah's gaze softened further, though the shadow of sorrow lingered. "To break a curse is not simple. It is never simple. It requires courage, understanding, and sacrifice. You will need to face truths you are not yet ready to accept, and you will need to confront darkness both outside and within yourself." Alurin's hands clenched the letter in his cloak. "Then I will face it," he said firmly, "no matter the cost." Elijah studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, we begin tomorrow. Tonight you rest. But know this, the path will not be easy, and the forest, it does not forgive those who falter." The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of smoke and something more, something older, more dangerous. The mist thickened around the glade, curling like fingers reaching for them. Alurin shivered, but he did not move away. He felt something in Elijah's presence, a strange pull, a connection that defied explanation. And though fear lingered in the pit of his stomach, it was joined by something else: hope, determination, and the first fragile stirrings of trust. The night stretched on, and the forest seemed to breathe around them. Somewhere in the distance, a howl echoed, long and mournful. Elijah stiffened, her hand brushing against the hilt of a small dagger at her waist. "They are coming," she whispered. "And they will not wait for us to be ready." Alurin's grip tightened on the shoes and the letter, his heart hammering. The journey had already begun, though he had only just stepped onto the path. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the forest, he sensed that the first challenge of his life, and perhaps of the kingdom's future, was waiting just beyond sight. As he looked at Elijah, standing poised and alert, he realized something profound. He was no longer a boy wandering in grief. He was a man walking toward destiny, guided by secrets, shadows, and the woman who was both his mystery and his guide. And somewhere in the mist, the forest seemed to whisper, "The story begins, and there is no turning back." The mist lingered like a shroud, curling around the gnarled roots of the ancient forest. Alurin followed Elijah closely, his eyes never leaving her figure, which moved with an ease that seemed impossible. The forest was alive in ways he could barely understand. Shadows twisted as if they had will, the wind carried whispers, and every step seemed to echo with distant memories not his own. Elijah led him to the edge of a cliff, where the trees broke and the world stretched into a valley bathed in silver moonlight. There, hidden beneath the roots of an enormous oak, was a stairway carved from stone, winding downward into darkness. "This place," Elijah said softly, "is older than the kingdom. It was built long before your mother was queen and long before the curse took hold. Only there, beneath the palace, can the truth be found." Alurin peered into the darkness. The stairway seemed to descend into eternity, the walls glistening with moisture and ancient inscriptions that pulsed faintly in the torchlight. "What curse?" he asked, voice low, almost afraid of the answer. Elijah hesitated. "It is tied to your bloodline, to your mother. And to me, you will see soon enough." The descent was slow, each step echoing through the stone tunnel. The air grew colder, heavier, and Alurin felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Faint whispers echoed from the walls, as if the stones themselves remembered every tragedy, betrayal, and sorrow that had ever passed through this place. Finally, they reached a chamber, vast and circular, lined with shelves of books, scrolls, and strange objects long forgotten. Candles burned with an unearthly flame, illuminating symbols etched into the stone walls, symbols that seemed to shift when he looked directly at them. "This is the library of the old magic," Elijah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Everything your mother feared, everything she tried to protect is here. But beware, knowledge has a price. Some truths can break a man if he is not ready. Alurin swallowed hard, but his determination did not waver. He had come too far to turn back now. He approached one of the shelves, running his fingers along the spines of ancient tomes. Dust rose in small clouds, catching the torchlight and shimmering like tiny stars. One book, bound in black leather and marked with a silver emblem, drew his attention. It felt alive beneath his fingers. Elijah noticed immediately. "You should not touch that yet," she warned. "It contains the essence of the curse. Only one of royal blood can read it without being overwhelmed." Alurin looked at her. "Then I am ready. I need to know." Elijah studied him for a long moment. Finally, she stepped aside. "Very well, but know this, the curse is not only upon me. It is upon you too. The moment you read, you are part of it." He opened the book, and a wave of cold rolled through him. The pages shimmered with moving symbols and images, showing events he had not lived but could feel. He saw his mother, younger, standing before a shadowed figure cloaked in black, pleading, bargaining, and finally making a choice that bound her magic, and hers alone, to protect the kingdom. "She made a pact," Elijah said quietly, watching him. "To save her people, she sacrificed herself in ways you cannot yet imagine. But the cost was the binding of my life. I became a guardian, trapped between worlds, unable to speak freely, unable to act fully until you came." Alurin's hands shook. "You mean the curse, it's because of my mother?" "Yes," Elijah said. Her voice carried a weight that made him feel the years she had spent in silence and fear. "She hoped you would never have to face it, but fate has other plans. You found the letter, the shoes, and now the threads of the curse reach for you." He sank to his knees, the book still open on the stone floor. He had known loss, but this was different. It was not just grief. It was responsibility, destiny, and the terrible knowledge that the woman standing before him had suffered for decades because of his family. Elijah stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You are not alone in this, Alurin. But you must understand, breaking the curse is not simple. It is not just power or courage. It is trust, sacrifice, and the acceptance of truths that may hurt more than any blade ever could." He looked up at her, seeing the weight she bore, the sadness in her eyes, and a flicker of hope. He had been searching for answers, and now they were here. And yet the answers brought more questions than he could count. "Where do we begin?" he asked, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Elijah gestured toward the glowing inscriptions on the walls. "Here, the first step is understanding, the history of the curse, the choices of your mother, and the paths she could not take. Only then can you decide how to act." They spent hours in the chamber, poring over ancient texts and scrolls. Alurin learned of the entity that had offered power to the queen, a being of darkness and cunning that thrived on fear and deception. It was this entity that had bound Elijah, using her as a guardian and a prisoner simultaneously. Only the heir, the child of the queen's blood, could untangle the bindings and restore balance, or doom the kingdom entirely. Each revelation made Alurin's chest heavier. His mother had carried these burdens alone, hiding the truth to protect him. And now he had inherited her destiny, along with the weight of her sacrifices. But amid the fear and the weight, a bond was forming between him and Elijah. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same scroll, and a spark of warmth traveled through him. She was distant, cautious, yet present, guiding him through knowledge he could not yet understand. And slowly he realized that trust and reliance were not weaknesses, they were strength, the kind of strength that could break curses and heal hearts. As night deepened, the chamber seemed to close around them. Shadows lengthened, twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. Alurin shivered. "They know we are here," Elijah said, her voice low. "The entity, it can sense the air, it watches, it waits, and it will test you." Alurin clenched his fists. "Then let it come, I will not run." Elijah's gaze softened, but her eyes carried the shadow of fear. "Be careful, the tests are not only of skill, they are of heart, mind, and soul. You may fail if you are not prepared." They spent the night in the chamber, the candle flames flickering and casting dancing shadows across the walls. Alurin read more of the texts, learning the history of magic, the weight of the curse, and the price of courage. Elijah watched him, her presence both comforting and enigmatic. At one point, a sudden chill filled the room. The shadows shifted violently, and a low, echoing voice reverberated through the chamber. "You are not ready, yet you have come. The heir walks into darkness willingly. Will he survive where others have fallen?" Alurin's heart raced, but he did not flinch. I will face it, he said firmly. The shadows recoiled, then disappeared, leaving only the soft glow of candles and the whisper of the wind through cracks in the stone. Elijah placed her hand gently on his arm. The entity tests those who approach it, she said. It seeks to break the will to sow doubt, but you have shown courage already. That is the first step. Alurin looked at her, feeling an unspoken connection, as if the threads of their fates were intertwining more tightly with each passing moment. I don't understand everything yet, he admitted, but I want to do what my mother could not. Elijah's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Then we begin in earnest tomorrow. The trials will be many and they will not be easy. But together, perhaps we can succeed. They left the chamber at dawn, stepping into a forest bathed in the soft glow of early light. The mist had thinned, but the air remained heavy with anticipation. Birds sang faintly in the trees, but the sense of being watched persisted, subtle and insistent. Alurin carried the knowledge of the curse, the weight of his mother's choices, and the first glimmers of understanding. And he carried something else, a quiet determination to see this through, to face the trials ahead, and to protect the woman who had become both guide and mystery. As they moved deeper into the forest, Elijah glanced at him. The path will not be kind, she said. But remember this, the curse feeds on doubt and fear. Courage and trust are the weapons you must wield, and there may be another force at work, something older than the kingdom itself. Be vigilant. Alurin nodded, gripping the letter in his cloak. He felt the weight of destiny pressing down, but also a spark of hope. Perhaps he could do this. Perhaps he could honor his mother, break the curse, and face whatever darkness awaited. And somewhere in the shadowed forest, beyond the reach of moonlight, the entity stirred. Its presence was a ripple of cold and malice, aware that the air had begun the journey. Its patience was infinite, and it would not rest until the air faltered or was broken. Alurin did not see it, but he could feel it. The path ahead would be dangerous. Every step would be a test, and the forest itself seemed to murmur, warning and guiding all at once. The curse waits, and so does destiny. The forest had grown darker, denser, as if the trees themselves were conspiring against them. Mist wove through the roots and branches, curling like smoke around Alurin's boots. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, set his nerves on edge. Elijah moved ahead with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, yet her eyes flicked constantly behind, alert and watchful. You feel it too, don't you? She asked softly. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, yet it carried through the still air. Alurin nodded, gripping the letter tightly. I can feel it, something watching, waiting. Elijah's lips pressed into a thin line. It always watches, the curse does not rest, and the entity it knows we are near. The first trial begins soon. Alurin's stomach tightened. Trials. He had expected dangers, yes, but he had not imagined tests of mind, heart, and soul, trials that would not be fought with sword or shield alone. They emerged from the forest into a valley that seemed to have been shaped by forces older than the kingdom itself. The ground was blackened and cracked, glowing faintly in places with a strange inner light. Stones rose jagged and sharp like teeth, and the air was heavy, as though it carried centuries of grief and anger. This is the trial grounds, Elijah said, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Here your courage, your heart, and your trust will be tested. The entity will attempt to break you, Alurin. It will show you visions, tempt you with fears, and force you to confront truths you may not want to face. Alurin took a deep breath. I am ready. Elijah's eyes softened, though a shadow lingered in them. Perhaps you will learn that bravery alone is not enough. You must be clever, patient, and above all, you must believe in what you cannot yet see. The first trial began with a sudden shift in the valley. The ground beneath Alurin's feet rippled like water, and the shadows stretched into twisted forms, rising taller than any man. Whispered voices filled the air, soft and insistent, repeating fears and doubts he had tried to bury. You cannot succeed. You are not strong enough. Your mother's sacrifice was in vain. Alurin's chest tightened, and he took a step back. But Elijah's hand touched his arm, grounding him. Do not listen, she said. It feeds on fear. Hold on to your truth. Hold on to me if you must. You are stronger than you believe. The shadows shifted, forming figures from Alurin's past. His mother appeared first, her face pale and sorrowful. Why did you come? The vision whispered. You cannot save what is already lost. Alurin felt tears prick his eyes. He wanted to run, to give in to despair. But he remembered the letter, the shoes, and the promise he had made to uncover the truth. He straightened his shoulders. "I am not here to undo what is past," he said, voice steady. "I am here to face the future, and I will not fail." The shadows recoiled slightly, writhing in anger. Then they shifted into a new form, his friends, the people he had loved and lost, blaming him, accusing him of weakness. Elijah's voice cut through the noise. "Do not doubt yourself. You carry your mother's courage, not her fear. Focus, Alurin. Only through understanding can you pass this trial." He took a deep breath, closing his eyes, and let himself feel the love he had for those lost, the memories he cherished, the hope he still carried. The shadows wavered, then dissolved into mist, leaving the valley eerily quiet. "You see," Elijah said, "the trial is not only about strength or courage, it is about what is inside you. The entity seeks to destroy that, but you held on to your heart. That is the first victory." Alurin nodded, feeling a surge of confidence, but before he could rest, the air shifted again. A low, echoing voice filled the valley, chilling him to the bone. "Courage is meaningless, love is weakness, you cannot save her, you cannot save yourself." From the shadows, a figure emerged, a dark, cloaked form that seemed to absorb light itself. Its face was hidden, but its presence radiated power and malice. Alurin's hand went instinctively to the letter in his cloak, as if it could protect him, though he knew it was only words on paper. Elijah stepped in front of him, dagger in hand. "Do not engage it with force," she warned. "You cannot fight it with steel. You must fight it with your mind and your heart. Do not falter." The figure moved closer, its form shifting like smoke and shadow. "I am the one who bound her, the one who bound you all," it said, voice low and resonant. "And now you dare to challenge me." Alurin's stomach twisted with fear, but he stood his ground. "I challenge not you," he said, voice firm. "I challenge the chains that have bound my mother, you, and this kingdom. I will not let you continue to rule through fear and despair." The shadow hesitated, and in that moment Alurin felt something, a warmth, subtle but steady. It was Elijah's hand on his shoulder, her presence beside him, and the memory of his mother's letter. He drew courage from them, letting it flow through him like fire. "You will not break me," he continued, stepping forward. "The curse is not stronger than love, hope, and truth. We are not your prisoners." The shadow hissed and surged forward, attempting to engulf him. But Alurin closed his eyes and focused on his intent, on the bond he shared with Elijah and the determination burning inside him. He imagined light flowing from his heart, expanding outward, pushing the darkness back. The shadow recoiled, shrieking as it dissolved into the mist. When Alurin opened his eyes, the valley was still. The trial had ended, for now. Elijah lowered her dagger and studied him. "You have passed the first trial," she said softly. "But this is only the beginning. The entity will test you again in ways you cannot yet imagine, and each trial will demand more strength, more understanding, more sacrifice." Alurin felt the weight of her words, but also a quiet pride. He had faced the darkness and emerged intact. For the first time, he felt that he could influence the fate of the kingdom and perhaps change the path of the curse. The forest around them seemed to exhale, the mist lifting slightly as if acknowledging their victory. Yet the tension lingered. The valley bore the scars of centuries, and Alurin knew that each step forward would bring new challenges. They rested briefly by a small, enchanted pool that reflected the moonlight like silver glass. Elijah knelt beside it, dipping her fingers into the water. "This pool holds memories," she said. "Some are yours, some are mine, and some belong to those long gone. In time, you will need to understand them all, and you will need to face them without fear." Alurin watched the water ripple, feeling the weight of countless lives and choices pressing against him. He had survived the first trial, but the forest and the curse still held many secrets. As dawn broke, the valley filled with soft, golden light, yet shadows lingered at its edges. The entity had retreated, but its presence was like a heartbeat in the air, constant and unrelenting. Alurin felt a mix of fear and determination. He had seen the danger, faced it, and survived. But he knew the greatest trials were yet to come. Elijah rose, her eyes meeting his. "We move on," she said. "The next trial will challenge you in ways you do not yet understand. But you have proven that you can endure, that you can resist the darkness. Hold on to that, and hold on to me if you must. You will need all your strength and all your heart." Alurin nodded, feeling a connection to her deeper than he had ever felt before. It was more than trust. It was a bond forged in shared struggle, in courage, and in the first true step toward understanding the curse. Together they left the valley, moving toward the heart of the forest where the next trial awaited. The trees grew taller, the mist thicker, and the air heavier with magic and history. The path was uncertain, but Alurin walked it with a steady heart, carrying the letter, the shoes, and the courage that had been tested and proven under the silver moon. And somewhere beyond the forest, in a place unseen and ancient, the entity watched. Its patience was endless, and it had already begun to weave the next test, the next temptation, and the next shadowed challenge. The air had survived the first trial, but the trials ahead would demand more than courage. They would demand transformation. Alurin did not know how far the path would take him, nor what he would discover about the curse, the entity, or the secrets his mother had left behind. But he knew one thing with certainty: he would not turn back, not now, not ever. And somewhere in the twisting shadows of the forest, a voice whispered, echoing like a promise and a warning. The trials have begun, and the fate of the kingdom rests in your hands. The heart of the forest awaited them like a sleeping giant. Trees older than memory formed a cathedral of shadows, their branches intertwined high above to blot out the sun. The air was thick with magic, heavy and ancient, and every step Alurin took seemed to hum with the pulse of the world. Beside him, Elijah moved with a silent grace, her hand brushing his at times, grounding him, reminding him that he was not alone. "This is where it ends or begins," she whispered, her voice soft yet firm. "The entity waits beyond these stones. The curse can be broken here, but it will not yield easily." Alurin nodded, his grip tightening around the letter from his mother. He had learned much since finding her shoes and reading her words. He had faced fear, confronted visions of doubt and loss, and tested his courage in ways he never imagined. Now he felt the weight of destiny pressing down upon him, heavier than ever, yet tempered by hope. The clearing ahead was circular, bordered by jagged stones that glimmered faintly with an inner light. At its center hovered a dark shape, a form shifting and writhing like smoke and shadow. The entity had arrived, aware of their presence, patient and eternal. "You come at last, heir of the bloodline," it intoned, its voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. "You have endured the trials, yet you are still untested. Do you dare face me and claim what has been withheld for generations?" Alurin took a deep breath. "I do," he said firmly. His voice carried the resolve he had forged through months of grief, trials, and learning. "I do not seek power for myself. I seek to free those bound by your curse, to honor my mother, and to save the kingdom." The entity shifted, forming faces from his past, friends lost, allies betrayed, shadows of fear. Its whispers filled the air, soft, seductive, and terrifying. "You cannot succeed. You are weak, unprepared, and bound by your emotions. Love and courage are fragile weapons." Alurin's hands clenched the letter. He felt Elijah's presence beside him, steady and reassuring. "I am not alone," he said quietly, though the words carried across the clearing. "Strength is not measured alone. It is in trust, in courage, in sacrifice. You will not break me." The shadows writhed violently, coalescing into a figure taller and darker than any man, its eyes glowing like embers in the black. It surged forward, and for a moment, Alurin felt a wave of fear crash over him. But he remembered the trials, the whispers of his mother, and Elijah's steady hand on his arm. He closed his eyes and let the lessons guide him. He thought of every step he had taken, every choice he had made, every moment of trust and courage. He imagined the love he had for his mother, the hope he carried for his people, and the bond he shared with Elijah. A warmth bloomed in his chest, a light that expanded outward, pushing against the darkness. The entity shrieked, a sound that rattled the stones, and surged toward him once more. But this time, Alurin did not retreat. He held his ground, letting the warmth of his heart guide him. The shadows writhed, clawing, twisting, but could not withstand the force of his resolve. Elijah stepped forward, raising her hand. A soft light flowed from her fingers, intertwining with Alurin's own energy. Together they formed a shield, a bond of heart and magic that neither shadow nor fear could penetrate. The entity faltered, recoiling, its whispers faltering as if the very air rejected its darkness. "You cannot win," it hissed, voice breaking with fury. Alurin opened his eyes. "I am not here to fight you with hatred," he said. "I am here to end this curse. To free you, me, her, and everyone who has suffered." A sudden silence fell over the clearing. The air shimmered, and the shadows began to unravel, dissipating into the mist. The entity's form wavered, its darkness folding into itself until only a faint silhouette remained. Elijah's light intertwined with the fading shadows, drawing them into the pool of energy that radiated from Alurin's heart. The letter from his mother glowed faintly, a beacon of hope and guidance. Olurin felt a surge of understanding. The curse had thrived on fear, secrecy, and despair. By facing it with courage, love, and trust, he could unravel its threads. The final moment came suddenly. The entity's remaining form surged toward him, faster than thought, but Olurin met it without hesitation. He extended his hand, and the warmth of his heart, the strength of his bond with Elijah, and the light of his mother's guidance flowed outward, enveloping the shadow. A low cry echoed through the forest, a sound of anguish and release. The darkness folded into itself, then vanished entirely, leaving the clearing bathed in a soft, golden light. The stones glimmered peacefully, the mist lifted, and for the first time in decades, the forest seemed to exhale. Elijah collapsed onto one knee, exhausted, her dagger lying forgotten. Olurin rushed to her side, helping her to stand. She smiled faintly, her eyes soft and warm, the tension of years lifted slightly, though the memory of the trials lingered. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he corrected gently. "Together." Elijah's gaze met his, and for a moment words were unnecessary. The bond they had formed through fear, struggle, and courage spoke louder than anything else. They had faced the darkness and survived, and in doing so they had forged something new, a hope that was stronger than any curse. The forest around them seemed to respond, sunlight filtering through the branches, illuminating the ground in golden patterns. Birds sang in the trees, and the air was fresh, free of the oppressive weight that had once filled it. The curse was broken, and with it, the legacy of fear and secrecy that had haunted the kingdom. Olurin looked down at the shoes from his mother, still clutched in his hand. They were small, delicate, a reminder of a past filled with love, sacrifice, and courage. He placed them carefully on the ground near the enchanted pool. "Mother," he whispered, "your guidance brought me here. I hope I have made you proud." Elijah watched him, her expression unreadable for a moment, then softening. "She would be proud, and so am I. You faced more than fear, you faced yourself, and you emerged stronger." Olurin felt a sense of peace settle over him. The weight of grief and responsibility was still there, but it was tempered by hope and understanding. The kingdom could be rebuilt, the future could be shaped, and he was no longer alone in the task. Together they left the clearing, moving through the forest now bright and calm. Each step felt lighter, freer. The trials had ended, but the journey was not yet complete. They had the knowledge to heal the kingdom, to guide it toward a future that honored the sacrifices of the past. They reached the edge of the forest as the sun rose fully, bathing the world in golden light. The palace ruins stood in the distance, but they no longer seemed desolate. The forest, the valley, and the trials had changed everything, not just the kingdom, but Olurin and Elijah. Elijah turned to him. "What happens now?" she asked. Olurin took a deep breath, looking at the horizon. "Now we rebuild, we guide the kingdom, and we honor those who came before us, and we face whatever comes next together." She smiled, and for the first time it was unburdened by fear or caution. "Together," she agreed. They walked toward the palace, side by side, the light of dawn stretching across the land. The trees behind them whispered softly, as if acknowledging their courage and sacrifice. The shoes of his mother lay behind, a symbol of love, guidance, and the journey that had brought him to this moment. And though the entity had been defeated, though the curse was broken, the world remained full of mystery, full of shadows and magic, waiting for those brave enough to face it. Olurin and Elijah had survived, not by avoiding fear or hiding from destiny, but by confronting it together with courage, trust, and love. As they approached the palace gates, the wind carried a whisper, a voice familiar yet distant, a promise and a blessing intertwined. "This is only the beginning." Olurin glanced at Elijah, their hands brushing, and he knew the truth of it. The trials may have ended, the curse may have been broken, but the story of the kingdom, of love, of courage, and of redemption would continue. Together, they would face it all. And so, beneath the rising sun, amidst the ruins of the past and the promise of the future, they stepped forward, heir and guardian, friend and guide, bound not by magic alone, but by something far stronger, the power of trust, hope, and a heart that dared to love. The journey was over, and yet it had only just begun.